Julia here with Sirius Stellus Moon. This is Venus, our Jupiter day. Venus is 29 degrees Libra, applying to square Pluto, and the Moon is 28 degrees Taurus, applying to conjoin Sedna and Uranus, and to oppose Mars at 1 degree Sagittarius, Mercury 6 degrees Sagittarius. This is continuation of the energy reading that I gave previously. I talked about several things to do with the levels of interference or the spheres or the real estates, okay? From the physical, geological, geopolitical, to the spiritual, the energetic, the cosmic, the astrological. Now, for you collective, each phase that is either unfamiliar to you or that you don't know that you occupy. And what do I mean by that? When child is born or conceived, okay, or cloned for that record, they have a birth chart. Some may call it a signal. I don't know how do they mean signal, but they have their own energy complexion and their birth chart. They have a lot of divination. They have the place where they will intuit things. They have the location of the sun and moon as per their trajectory. Okay, and it is it's not a static. The birth chart is a beginning point that will have trajectory, and there are many other charts that will have trajectory. So when it comes to each and every individual, then they have their own energy. And on all the real estates, okay, spiritual, physical, cosmic, and so on and so forth, they exist. Sedna really shows us that. Sedna shows the place of the being in the ecosystem, okay? And it is both understanding that, hey, the universe is huge, right? We're not the entire universe, and yet each and every configuration has such impact on the ecosystem. If we put it in another place or in another configuration, completely other things will occur, good and bad. Now, the type of threads of people that took over those real estates by birthing children into trauma. And this is what happened to the cloned people, because they were going through horrific rituals, and it's the same for some shamanic traditions. Okay, those rituals were inspired by shamanic traditions. People don't like to talk about that, but we're talking about sexual boundary violation, beyond horrific things, to do with the family, the place where was. Okay, Trudy mentions that. And that was to make it impossible for these children to be sovereign, free, and be aware that, and here's the thing, they would be given, those that will stay in the system, they would be given mansions, they would be given access to networks, networking, spiritual teachings, and so on and so forth. But those will be always an approximation. And the reason being is because they were going through these rituals to always be controlled and believe that something is coming from the outside. Okay? And even And they made it so that they had to perpetuate evil. So when they look at something that's coming from the inside, they cross barriers of transmuting shame and behavioral patterns that they were consistently beyond discouraged to have. Okay, there was basically an experiment, no longer an experiment, to eradicate everything that is not, that is sovereign, that is kindness, that is heart connected. Now here's the thing, it's not that they don't have those heart connections, because they're supposed to appeal to the crowd. Um, but they were under the teaching that basically the face of God is everything and they are God. And they were expected to be everything, to do evil, to do good, and so on and so forth. Now, the deep inherent horror in this is that they went through horrors and were forced to perpetuate horrors. So much so that expression of love, okay, let's just put it that way, seemed unreal. And or would always be used in extortion, let alone sexuality, sensuality, and so on. So it created a trajectory where they wanted to experience everything and control everything. Now, even the people born on not clones, they were not even given those teachings. So basically, people were not given teachings, or people were given teachings but following intense trauma that even the teachings were used in a gaslighting setting and situation. It's either the teaching is true but the setting is gaslighting, or the teaching is false and the setting is true, or is no, or the setting has no teaching. Now, for you, the collective, on whichever trajectory you are along that, you are meant to be present in all your levels of being, and it also has, I think about the Ayurvedic tradition, but there is astrology, but there is also the food and the medicine, and there is also the geospectrum. Okay, I did on Spirit of Matter my very first interview, and this was a funny story because I looked for channels that are not so familiar to give them chance of exposure. And I was expecting, if, let's say, colleagues of mine would have astrology podcasts, then I was expecting to reach the crowd that it's their first time doing a big talk, or don't yet have experience in giving talks or going to conferences. So it would be kind of a place where people can meet, even if they're not on the astrology podcast yet or something like that. And to my surprise, the very first interview was a person that talked to me about how he would look to the environment for clues regarding the question that the person coming with. And his acquaintance with the environment in the chart, okay, and the philosophies and so on, was so profound that I was simply shocked, because because I think I'm going to speak to a person that just began to study astrology and wants to practice speaking, and then I meet a person that I don't even know what honor I had to meet him. Okay, it's kind of like. But what I want to say is that each and every individual is present on all levels of presence, and that is also a geopolitical, spiritual, cosmic location. Now, those that were going through rituals and given certain teachings, but the teachings were askew, and they couldn't connect with their own selves on a, you know, on a real way, okay? um, Basically, they were intended to do certain rituals that keep trauma trajectories on various real estates: astral, physical, political, cosmic, the sphere of the sciences. And thus, it created a situation of divide and conquer. But nobody conquers, nobody is truly divided because nobody is truly present, and thus the unity that is aspired to is a melting pot rather than a unity of sovereigns that have their individual place, and there can be frictions and tolerances between the people. Now, this is where whenever people go about a certain healing or a certain trajectory or a certain manifestation, they begin to occupy that real estate. They also begin to heal, okay? And those that were harvesting on them not being themselves, or them not being the trajectory, or them not being in their own energy, first of all, they were doing so for misguided thinking that they don't have it in their chart, or they, you know, and what is basically becoming apparent is that um, people believe that something is given to them from the outside and you have to fight for it, whereas in fact the inside that contains it, and those that operate on those timelines, what they call them, parasitic timelines, okay, or basically trauma timelines. They try to make a people think, or they genuinely believe that something is theirs, even though they did rituals to try to take it from another. It goes all the way to real estate, but also to spirituality, divination, and this is why um, in a lot of whether cults or totalitarian or authoritarian regimes, you see how the profession of the diviner is being used to fool the masses, and a lot of diviners are not cool with that. They're not cool with that, and each person has a lot of divination in their chart. And so how should I say that? The desire is to see what people see, but to change the timeline. And when Trudy addressed the horrid rituals that are done on clones in infanthood, okay, she addressed something that they call time traveler. Anybody, Montauk? And some people learn to shift timelines, and this is where they want the shifting of timelines to be from trauma, to be trauma timelines. But when we transmute that, we see that that the timeline is not traumatic. But this is with the people that went through horrid abuse, they would access these timelines and hijack these timelines. It's not on purpose. They gone through a lot of something that was by design so that they will take from the light and transmute to the dark. Now they have capacity to transmute. Some of them can even exercise this capacity to transmute from the dark to the light. But for them, it's almost like something is transmuted. Okay? If it's kind of like a person that has one tool at the toolbox, and this is transmute. So it sees light, it transmutes to dark. It sees dark, it transmutes to light. And this is where one of the best manifestations would be to go into the dark and transmute to the light. To go into the dark and transmute to the light. But when they meet the light, they try to transmute it to the dark, or to take it into the dark. So it's like trying to wealth redistribute, but with trauma. And everything is seen from the scope of those trauma worlds. So that was done so that the real estates will be occupied by control timelines. However, the telos is to go sovereign. The telos is always to go sovereign. And so this is where people begin to discover that they have divination, okay, that they have a divining quality, each and every person, and that they have manifestation qualities, and that they have sensual connection, that they have counterparts where they didn't know, okay, and there are forces that are operating to delay those gnosis, those insights, so that they can keep transmuting. Okay? And it's usually because they have things to transmute within. And they try to take the light from the outside. Now, each and every one of us is on the trajectory of basically growing and being more present. And as we are more present, we naturally begin to occupy also our geospheric, cosmic, and earthly sphere, which is considered real estate, to be collectivized or privatized, but not sovereign. And yet that real estate is inherently sovereign. Okay? And this is why you would see when people do when there's spiritual warfare, okay? You would see, first of all, that all those weird trajectories would come like voodoo coming from the church. What is voodoo doing in the church? Okay, and then people begin to awaken regarding the esoterics of their own religions. And at the same time, they would begin to see that, I remember when I was on the property and I was digging half moons and I saw the pebbles, and I remember the first manifestation exercise that I tried, I was watching Teal Swan, and she's also a ritual abuse survivor, and she thought to envision a pebble. It was really, really difficult for me. And I saw pebbles, and then there were rituals done to narrow my steps, to make the half moon smaller. And then I was brought into the city. And in the city, I still did these half moons, okay? And it was still pebbles showing up. And those attempts to narrow my steps, okay, they only unveiled that I was onto something. Okay? And I was shown that there is, by the way, one of the things that I remember was eco-erotics. I was like, I didn't know there was such a thing. And so I was shown that there is oil underneath, and there could be other things underneath. For example, a lot of people, I think the Gen X talks about the skibidi toilet, okay, because they are aware of this is the Pluto Capricorns, they are aware of the tunnel structures. And basically there are structures underground where rituals are done to keep the trauma realms, so that when people try to ground themselves, they will have to transmute those trauma realms. Now what's the deal? People do ground themselves and they do transmute. Okay? And so you think about it, if a person is transmuting the traumas around the lower chakras, working with the soil, what happens? They begin to occupy what? Real estate. And if all people did that, all people will have sovereign soil. Not by tribe, not by nation, not by collective, not by globalism, by sovereignty. It doesn't mean that there wouldn't be connections, communities, and so on and so forth. But they would not be instilled on a hierarchy that is of control. Now, when do we see the most? Orgasm, conception, Zoata, okay? And it's an inner process, you know. Um, Now, this telos is inevitably happening. Even the people that ask themselves, why am I alive? And they wanted to even not to be alive anymore because of the suffering. And the suffering was trying to constrict them into something that they're not. To try to occupy, and the occupation of that real estate was not outside, but also of the soul, of the essence of within. And when that happens, okay, then this is where people um, people begin to realign, and people will always notice, because whenever there's a crisis, another layer and another layer and another layer is realigned. Let's say if you have divine inequalities. Now, every person has a lot of divination. I had a friend that she was relationship coach and filmmaker, and her husband mathematician. And she said, my husband is so intuitive, and he doesn't call it intuition. It's like claircognizance, okay? He would be so intuitive, and he wouldn't even question things, where she had to watch all this Abraham Hicks and so on, and she became very intuitive. For her, she found the parking spot in cities. She found how to park her car in a city, and she would use it as practical application of intuition. And one day I cat-sittered their cats, and the cat was channeling to her where he was and when he's coming back, and he came back exactly time he said he will come back. He was also channeling to her the disease that he had in the stomach. Nobody could diagnose. And I was back then doing thesis on the body-mind question in academics, in the medicines. So now here's the thing, because unsavory things are done on various real estates, physical and cosmics. For example, when I was digging half moons, it was this particular energy that I connected with, that I was constantly, write this person. I'm like, why? And and I received consecutive signs that they did not even know if I'm real. And so every time I connected with that energy, it was like, never mind the bodies in the backyard. Every time, never mind the bodies in the backyard. And I realized that where I was digging the half moons, it's not impossible that there were bodies in that backyard. Now, at that time, I toyed with building something that could have an underground floor or whatnot as a model, okay? Reforesting, like just playing with ideas. Now, this began to expose whatever would be on that real estate. Okay? And it took, I think, after I left a year or so, it was actually Light on YouTube that tapped into the timeline where she saw there were rituals done to prevent growth in the people that live in that real estate. So this is where I never tapped into an idea of be like an exorcist to rituals in real estate. Okay, that's not something that I would think about. Okay? But I do have Rahu Chiron in the 4th house with a ruler in the 2nd, which means a skill around housing and the foundation and the fundamentals and a sense of embodiment in the house and upbringing. So another thing is divination, where I would do astrology, and I have a lot of divination, 29 degrees Scorpio in the whole sign 9th house. So it's predictions, bold predictions. Okay, mundane astrologer. I have it in me to be mundane astrologer. Every person has a lot of divination. It would just meet them through a certain trajectory. To some, it would meet through their partners. To some, through their teachers. And indeed, I had astrology teachers like Lada Dunsheva, Roman Kolov, Gracia Tassio, and yes, and Trifon that were all mundane astrologers, very good mundane astrologers. And then from Chris Brennan, I learned the Hellenistic astrology, the zodiac releasing, and so on and so forth. Yes, and then I thought I would never dabble into talismanic art until Austin Coppock energy ran into mine and almost forced me to do that. And so, um, so basically, there were a lot of resistances to me doing divination or astrology, both because of misunderstandings, preconceptions, believing that I would be like these matchmakers that make people that don't fit together, and then because it's their karma that this or that. No, I'm not. I'm nothing like that, and or because I don't. And here's the thing: because I don't, it means that I would not keep people from occupying the real estates that they need to occupy in spirit, in matter, in the cosmos, and so on and so forth. And that basically is where there was another sphere that was occupied by people that were operating by certain rules and interests, that suddenly there was a newcomer. And these newcomers, and I think Light will resonate a lot because she's doing that with divination. And this is where that newcomer is a newcomer to that list of divination, and it's like there is a desire, and I really, really thank Light when she said that there was a desire to see what one is seeing and transform the timeline. Or if a person is learning how to move timelines, there was an attempt to attack them so that they will not practice this ability in order to do things of the light. Or to spiritually attack them so that they won't be in the astral realm, because then they would begin to transmute to decolonize the astral. Okay. And for you, the collective, whichever trajectory you are, wherever you came from, there is something about you that people begin to be decolonized, or they begin to decolonize the very entities, trajectories, and everything that was occupying them that is not of the light. And to the degree that people are ready, willing, whatnot to do that, they are meeting you or somebody like you, okay? And then they can have situations where they can fall off, or where they can be attacked because now they're decolonizing. And they would have another source and another source that helps them and reconnects with something that is from within, on that timeline, on that frequency. Now, this is why the people that really want to be there with you, they're going to have to transmute, they're going to have to decolonize. Now, here's the thing about your collective. You're not sitting here waiting for people to be ready, to be this, to be that. But you're also not closing yourself off to the qualities and the spheres and the real estates that you are meant to decolonize, because they are yours. And those that do those rituals, some of them know that. They know that they could bring you to this trajectory because you belong in this trajectory. They know that if they put you, you think about, if you see it from quantum mechanics, when you collapse a quantum system, okay, there is a probability. There are various places where that particle can end up in, but it's only those places and not others. So they toyed with the idea of bringing you to the place where you could collapse into, but keeping you small, or trying to bring you to places where you're not meant to collapse there. And along with that, there are various beings that awaken you. Now, it can be from various interests. It can be that person whose real estate you occupy with your light rituals, transmuting all the darkness, exposing everything that they did. They have the interest for you to get out, so they try to awaken you that, hey, you can live also here and here and here. Look at this and this and this. Or you can have people that say, come on, do you want to stay stuck here forever? Well, you go about your trajectory, okay? And one of my previous channelings, I spoke about someone that was trying to transmute someone's fears, and at the same time they were doing things to do with trafficking. And this was an intimacy block. Now, there are people that would try to collapse your freedom into their timelines, whether it's feminine or masculine. If you're masculine, if you operate regardless of your gender in your masculine energy, they would try to make you think, or they try to make your actions utilize to their trajectory. Or if you're feminine energy, they would try to have your freedom, movement, sensuality as a bait, and to collapse that timeline into, trafficking timeline. None of that fits. Now, and the thing is that you would always bounce back, and it can have a Uranus connotation to it, because you will always bounce back, and you will bounce back with more information, more of the spheres that you're meant to occupy. And the more they try, basically, the more present you are, the more aware you are, the more intentional you are, and the more at flow and at ease you are. So much so that those that try to mimic you, there's a threshold where they need to collapse into. And I talked about autumn. A lot of this is going to happen in autumn, because we go into the winter. And those forests that are not evergreen, okay, the leaves change their colors and they fall off the tree. And to re-engage with you, they will have to transmute something and remove the blockade that they try to put over the real estates in your life. Now also you begin to grow out of the courtesan-cartesian division and its residues in those spheres, which means that you begin to occupy something that is not of occupation, something that is native and inherent to your own trajectory. I said Pluto in Aquarius is going to be like foraging because it's growing discernment. And growing discernment is nothing more than growing authenticity. This is what's transmuting. And those that want to occupy those real estates of the sky, okay, the eyes that sees all, they are going to have to accommodate and accommodate and accommodate and accommodate and accommodate and accommodate to a system collapse. Because they can watch, but they cannot watch with an eye that collapses the gaze into their own timelines. And if they want to time travel in those real estates, they will have to transmute. Now, it's not a bad thing. It just means that they will operate less from trauma and more from light. Yes, it's not bad news for anyone. It's just that it seems unreal and utopic, which is not. And for you, the collective, for whichever trajectory you're coming from to those things, it goes beyond capitalism and socialism. And it doesn't play into ultimatums. And those that have the mockery timeline to that, they are mocking nothing but themselves. It's not about, some people were taught it's about get away with, but even that is low frequency. Because when a post like what Trudy posted comes up to the air, it exposes things that were done to people that they may not be even aware. And those that encounter that, encounter the place where that could be a possible explanation to the foundations of all of their conceptions. The approximation shatters into essence. And we can no longer say, these people don't have souls. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. And it's the light shed on those rituals that collapses the effect of those rituals. Now here's the thing, when I was in university, I was addicted to coffee because I did not have enough money to buy food. And food was not nourishing enough because of the soil, because of many things. So I would buy coffee with milk so that I can be satiated and listen to lectures. And then I was also athletic. I would go swimming for hours and hours and hours. Free swimming pool. That's how I picked my university. I was receiving funding by the time, a degree that I can finish on time, because I wanted to go for physics, but it was not enough not enough brain, so I went for politics because physics they wouldn't maybe they would prolong, but physics to finish degree is very difficult within the 3 years, and so I went to politics and English language and linguistics, and so I was addicted to coffee. And then I remember I went with my friend. We're going through this shop where they have those energy crystals. And I said, it was costing only like less than a coffee. And I said, at least to hold it in my hand and to think about something that's not food. Because I did not have enough money to buy food, but this was something that I needed more than food. And I didn't know that. And then I buy rose quartz and I feel like wanting to fill my entire room with rose quartz. And I remember I thought it was placebo. Then I had malachite under my pillow, and I forget about it. And then I can't sleep, I can't sleep, I can't sleep, I can't sleep, I can't sleep. I fix my bed, I take this malachite away because it needed to be cleansed energetically. And then I slept well, and I'm like, oh my God. What's that? Okay, I'm in academia, mind you. Okay. What happened? And then I began to work with the energy of crystals. To me, at that time, it was more important than food. Not because food was not important, but because if I had those limited resources, knowing the crystal energy, and each one of them came from different place in the world and different conditions, some were ethically mined, some not ethically mined. Okay, I really don't know. And with that resource was more important for me, even though I didn't have food enough to work with the energy of those crystals, providing healing, love energies on frequencies that were more important to me at the time than food, and more nourishing. Of course, I needed to eat as well. And so unbeknownst to me, I began a certain trajectory that would serve me to protect myself with assistance of others during a spiritual warfare. Okay? Because they would try to trump the crystal, and then I would tap into the crystal, and that would stop the attack. Or if they tried to take the crystal away, then I would come up with the crystal from the soil. So and when they would try to strip that away, then some assistance would come. And sometimes because they had an interest of their own, and sometimes not. Like, there are many things, and here is the thing about it. I would normally not go to a crystal shop and think that there is anything more than a luck cookie there for me. How that pertains to minerals, mining, and housing. Okay? So, this is just one trajectory. Now, for each and every one of you collective, there are your own things that some of you don't even think about, that you came to transmute, you came to be doing, and there was a desire to kind of keep you in check, because and here's the thing, even if somebody clashes with your creation, staying in their lane would be easy for them. And they wouldn't even tell you stay in your lane, because they're like, hey, that person's probably just discovering their lane. They would just, assert their boundaries to their lane and so on. But if they have overextended themselves, then they would try to keep you in your lane, not knowing that your lane is including more territory and more real estate in all spheres, astral, spiritual, energetic, cosmic, and so on and so forth. Because, and sometimes very knowing, they try to fool you and to think that you are the fool. Now, maybe you were ignorant of this up until now, but they would even do it as much as tell you, reconnect with your roots, connect to your roots, connect to your roots. Then when you connect to your roots, they try to take you away from that connection because they want to mimic. Whether it's mimic your ancestry or whether it's, I don't know what. Because what they don't see coming is that, no, the way they try to get a hold of you is not sovereign. Which means that they have still things to transmit in their own selves. And those that try to keep you in check, to keep you from growing. Okay? That to be too invasive and to judge you for the things when they are the ones that have been too invasive. So this is where okay, think about it. Somebody has a policy that they do funnel money, funnel money, funnel money. That's supposed to be for people and make big war and so on. Okay? Of course they would meet the people that were like, hey, those are our sovereignties. It's our opportunities. We have a say in that. But also those people would be exposed to, well, why is this person acting this way? And now it's in the light. Okay? And this is where, it's just one example. And the more they would try to fumble and undermine your resources, they won't like it, but they're being kept in check, and all that they know is to be abrasive, aggressive, whatnot, and so on. Then, okay, then they will have to respect that boundary, and it also means that they will kind of have to transmute certain things because, it's like, okay, they're not a fool, they're not stupid, they're not getting it, they're not, you know. And if all of what their businesses models or the real estate models were about people being in trauma, people being full, people being not sovereign, people staying ignorant, then a lot of things collapse for them. This is why I said when entire time when Mars was in Scorpio, plan for sovereignty. If somebody makes money of other people's stupidity, okay, and they go from one fool to another, eventually they will run out of fools. Okay, so they will need to learn a new coping mechanism. Or now here is the thing: when I was addicted to coffee because I had no money for food, if I would see food, I would eat like there's no tomorrow. But when we have enough, we don't feel like we need to eat the entire plate. Maybe we want to taste a little bit of many things, but the thing is that when we are well nourished, then we have enough. It's not gluttony. There's something underneath there. And replenishing that is where those that overextended themselves will by natural find their way back into themselves. And those that relied on perpetuating trauma to people will have a crisis of reckoning of why do they do that? And it's in the light that this is a coping. Remember when I said certain coping mechanisms are no longer going to be relevant? And it's collapsing complete timelines because it's both relational and mundane in this economy, sozusagen. And people are forced to deal with that reckoning. You know, when masses of people ask, why don't people want to work? They need to prepare for the answers. Okay, and I talked about, because people will look into themselves and say, really, what are my traumas around workplaces? What is my trauma around money? What is my trauma around making business? And it requires for the entire world to go out of all the boxes that were for everyone. If somebody would say the word work to me after I reached a place where I was completely collapsed and said, give me studies or give me death, then I would look at them and I would see a human trafficker. And you imagine the rage, okay? And people wouldn't understand. Because I saw the time, it's like my body, my mind sensed the timeline where they would try to traffic people on all professions. There are a lot of black women or people of color, women of color, that are arrested. I say arrest, a manifest, arrest, a manifest. Now, for certain women, it's like, wait a second, what